Hello there guys, welcome to this breakdown of Titan Quest Atlantis expansion, the new skills. So with this new Atlantis expansion, they've added an extra tier for every mastery. So there's 10 masteries now, because if you remember, last expansion had Rune Mastery added. So now they have an extra tier of skills. So if you remember, the top tier was 32 mastery points. So now there's an extra tier with 40 mastery points. So you have to get 40 mastery points to get to the extra top tier, and that top tier for every mastery has 2 new skills added. So now with 2 skills and 10 masteries, there's now 20 new skills added. Now the skills do vary. Some of them are entirely new skills, so not linked to any of the previous skills, and others are synergies to some of the older skills, making them even better or putting some new twist on them. So I'm just going to be talking about each of the skills here and what I think about them and where I think each of the skills could come in useful, like what sort of builds and, play styles. Okay, so for the first I'll go through the fight masteries, and then I'll go to the magic masteries, and I'll put in the video description, I'll put the links so you can quickly jump to the mastery that you're interested in case if you don't want to sit through the whole video. So, okay, so let's begin with the warfare. Alright, so the first skill that was added in warfare is called Slam. So Slam description says it's a hit all enemies in a straight line with staggering force. So it's basically hits and enemies that are along a line. So it's not overly long ranged, but it's quite a decent range, and it deals quite a fair bit of damage and does reduction to enemies' health, and it also does a few other debuffs such as impaired aim and skill disruption and stun. So it is a fairly decent skill. I won't say it's not the most powerful or the most useful skill in warfare, but it can help out quite a fair bit. Especially it doesn't have an overly long recharge time. If you know, it's only 7 seconds. So the stats that I actually have shown here, that's actually at the maximum level, which is 12. So it requires 12 points in total to get it to this good stage. So you could, of course, go with just a handful of points if you just want to use it for the sake of the debuffs. But if you want the damage and the debuffs to get a full benefit from that, then you would have to max it out. So I'd say it's a decent skill to use every now and again. You could even stick it on your right mouse button, and it would work for pretty much most warfare builds, I think. It just depends on how many spare skill points you have, really, and if you have more important skills to go for, because some skills would be your better choices than this one, but it is generally a pretty decent skill. So the second warfare skill is actually a synergy to the Ancestral Horn. So the Ancestral Warriors, if you remember, that was one of the summons at the previously top tier of warfare. And Ancestral Warriors, they used to be quite underwhelming actually, because they were not particularly strong, and they would only last like 20 seconds. Now this synergy called Lasting Legacy, it doesn't make them stronger or anything, it only just keeps them alive for longer, and it's actually quite a substantial change. With each point, it's 6 points in total, and with each point it adds extra 3 or 4 seconds. So you can put as many points in this as you want, depending on how much you use Ancestral Warriors. But if you notice, at the maximum level, that's about 21 seconds, which is almost doubles the duration of these Ancestral Warriors, actually making them much more useful. So you'll be able to actually summon them during boss fights a lot more, and they might actually last for the entirety of the boss fight. So this could actually be a very good, skill to go for if you actually are going for Ancestral Warriors, and its presence actually does make Ancestral Warriors much more worth going for. Although if you remember, Ancestral Warriors, it is a very skill point hungry tree. It's got like 16 points that you have to put into it. So you do have to keep note of if you have enough spare skill points, because can you spare 16 points in the Ancestral Warriors, and then extra 6 points for this skill. So I'd say it would be probably more useful for builds which are a little bit fragile, so the ones which can't really tank enemies too well. So then you would use these guys to actually draw some of the aggravation from the energies towards them rather than towards you. So you're probably not gonna use it too much as a Conqueror, for example, which can tank damage really well, but you would use it for something builds like a Champion, for example, which got Nature, because Nature can have benefits to pets as well, or Harbinger, which is Warfare and Dream, because Dream, the nightmares mastermind skill, it actually makes pets stronger. Or anything which pretty much extends the aura towards the pet. So Earth Enchantment in the Earth Mastery, for example, that's going to spread the aura of the Earth Enchantment to these guys as well. So anything like that, any mastery that has those kind of skills would actually make these guys a lot more useful for you. So that's something worth keeping in mind. Alright, so the next one I'll go to is Defense. So Defense, the two new skills in Defense are actually completely new, so neither of them are synergies. So the first one is Unyielding Phalanx. So that one is basically a summon, so it's actually kind of similar to the Ancestral Warriors in Warfare, but it's got a bit of a different spin on it. So these guys, they don't move, they're entirely stationary and they're just standing in a line. So in that sense, I think it's less useful. So Ancestral Warriors in Warfare are actually better in that sense because they can actually move around. These guys are just standing there and just fighting anything that's close by to them. And if you notice, they don't last long, so they only last like 13 seconds at the maximum level. They have quite long recharges, also 80 seconds recharge, so to be honest, I don't think it's that much of a great skill. I mean, it's not entirely terrible, but it's more gimmicky than useful, so it just looks kinda cool, because you summon these guys and they're just standing in this phalanx line. There's only like about 7 or 8 of them, so it's not like it's an entire army or anything. But yeah, I don't find them to be particularly powerful either, or even drawing aggro that well. So I mean, you got much better skills in Defense Mastery to go for than this. So unless you really have low spare skill points and you have nothing else to go for, then you could go for this. So the other skill in Defense that they added is called Perfect Block. So this one, what it does is that it basically, for a split second, as soon as you activate it, it basically will allow you to absorb any incoming damage. But it's such a short duration. If you notice, it's like 100% damage absorption. So any damage that will be dealt to you during that second will actually be absorbed. So you'll take no damage during that moment. But on the flip side, if you notice, it's got minus 100% to attack speed and casting speed. So you're not going to be able to attack during that second either. It is only 1 second though, so it's quite a short duration. It's not going to be particularly useful. I mean, it's got quite a short recharge time, 9.7 seconds. So you can actually spam it quite often. But because of its nature of it just, lasting 1 second, you have to time it kind of really well with when the enemies attack you, when you swarm the loads of enemies, for example. So it's a little bit of that, it will encourage a bit of that playstyle where you have to time things, so if you're not that kind of person who likes to perfect timing, you're probably not going to find this skill useful. And I say, even if you're going for this skill, it's more like a 1-point wonder, I'd say, because the only stat that actually increases with each new point is the movement speed, which I selected here. So the movement speed is the only one, so whilst you're blocking, you're just going to be moving a bit faster. But, I mean, most of the time it lasts 1 second, so it's not like you need to move a lot. So I'd say if you are going for the skill, then one point is enough, really. But I'd say it's not going to be suitable for every person. So it's more depends on your playstyle than what other skills you have. So do you want to be the person who's like really concentrating on just timing things perfectly, or do you just want to actually just relax and, have things already pre-planned out? So yeah, again, I won't say it's the best not among the best of the newly added skills, but it's kind of like, it's okay, I'd say. Okay, so now let's move on to Rogue. So Rogue has one entirely new skill and one with synergy. So the new skill that they added is called Blade Barrier. So this one is actually primarily a piercing and bleeding damage skill. So this is actually quite suitable for any kind of bleeding builds, the ones which rely on bleed damage. But even if you're not relying on bleed damage, it's still fairly decent sort of summon in a way, you could say. So it's like creates like 3 swirling blades in a small area. So well, it's not entirely small, it's kind of reasonably sized area, and it will basically deal piercing and bleeding damage every second to anyone caught in that. So basically, the stats that you actually see here, which are at level 10, it actually shows up to level 11, but that's because I had +1 to all rogue skills. So 10 is actually the maximum level for this skill. So if you notice the stats that it gives, it actually happens per second. So if you take into account that it actually lasts 10 seconds, that's actually quite a hefty amount of damage that it deals overall. And it deals to every enemy inside the radius. So it's not a bad skill, it's pretty decent actually. I'd say it's well worth going for. For most rogue builds, it will be quite useful. It's got a reasonably okay recharge time, so 30 seconds is not amazing, but for a skill this powerful, it's actually pretty good, I'd say. So I'd say generally if you're a rogue character, this would be a very useful skill, especially if you're focusing on a bleeding damage. This will be even better. It does have quite a fair bit of an energy cost though, so 145 energy if you notice. So if you're going to be using this a lot, so you might want to actually put several attribute points into energy and make sure you actually can afford to summon this on a frequent basis. It's especially good for the kind of enemies that have very high armor and high defense, so kind of like sea turtles and this kind of enemies, it's good against them. It's not going to be very useful against the undead or the constructs though, because those guys are resistant to bleed and piercing. Okay, and the other skill that they added in the Rogue Mastery is actually synergy to the Poison Gas Bomb. So this one's called Poison Mayhem. And what it does is basically increases the number of poison gas projectiles. So before you had one, and you had also previously had the synergy to create this shrapnel, so it actually breaks into pieces. Now you actually have, up to 3 bombs you can throw at once, so it's pretty great. So I'd say the more bombs the better. You know, this is good for any poison build, or even just not necessarily just for poison, even if you're just concentrating on just want to spread kind of mayhem in the enemy ranks. If you notice, it's got 50% chance of fear and 25% chance of impaired aim, so it's pretty good. Some of the projectiles can be sometimes a little off target, so they might miss the intended target, but in general it should hit, because it releases a cloud of gas sort of when it explodes, so it should hit most of the enemies around you. So I'd say it's a pretty good skill as well to go for. So both of the newly added rogue skills are actually pretty decent. So I would recommend both of them generally, but if you can go just for one of them, then it depends if you're focusing on bleeding or more on poison. Okay, so let's move on to hunting. So hunting had one synergy to an old skill and one new skill added. So the synergy to the old skill is called Finesse, and that's added to the Call of the Hunt tree. So Call of the Hunt was a temporary buff that you activate, which makes you quite substantially more powerful. It adds quite a lot of bonuses. And Finesse actually adds some really amazing bonuses. It has a massive offensive ability bonus if you notice. So it's got a small 2% chance of reduction to enemy's health, but the more impressive bonus is a 450 offensive ability and also a percentage increase as well, so 10% increase. So with just 8 points, it's actually really amazing bonus. So if you are going for the Call of the Hunt tree, then this is really worth getting. But, however, if you keep in mind, this will only be useful for the melee builds. So if you're a spear hunter, it's going to be useful, but if you're an archer, it's not going to be useful at all, because bows don't really utilize offensive ability, and just getting it for the 2% chance of reduction to enemy's health might not be worth it. Maybe just 1 point at most, but it doesn't seem to be worth spending 8 skill points on just that small 2% chance. So in that sense, you're not getting much benefit. Although this temporary buff, it does apply to your allies as well. So if you've got pets, if you're using pet builds, then this could actually come in useful. So yeah, so I wouldn't really go for this skill as an archer, unless you've got pets, but I'll definitely go for it as a hunter. The only drawback really about this skill is that the whole Call of the Hunt tree has a very long cooldown. It's like 3 minutes long cooldown, so you're not going to be able to use this amazing offensive ability bonus as frequently as you'd like. But since the Call of the Hunt does last fairly good amount of time, like about 30 seconds or so, that means you could save it up for when you're facing bosses. So against the bosses, this will actually become very useful. This could be a nice boss killer ability. And the other skill they added in hunting is called Spear Dance. So that's an entirely new skill, and again, it's only just for spears. So technically, if you're an archer, you're kind of getting shafted with these new skills. You're not getting anything. There's not much help really for an archer character with these 2 new skills, but for a spear character, you could, both of them actually favor spears. So the Spear Dance, it's a lot like the Whirlwind in a Warfare Mastery, except without the charging forward bit, you know. So in that sense, it's actually a bit inferior because it doesn't charge forward. You just do it while you're stationary. You just spin around, hit all the enemies around you. And it also, just like in the Whirlwind, it actually starts with like the first few points in it. It actually has a penalty to damage to each character that you deal. But as you max it out, it actually has an increase in physical damage. The only things that it does add that Whirlwind didn't have is that it actually adds some debuffs to the enemies. So it adds 52% chance of some fear, and also 50% slower attack for a couple of seconds. So in that sense, it actually can slow the enemy attack, and it actually gives you a bit of a breather room. It's got an okay recharge time. So what can I say? It's not my favorite skill in the hunting mastery, but it's pretty decent. So if you have better skills to go for in hunting, then go for them. Yeah, but if you have some spare skill points, then this skill would be good. But with this skill, if you're going for it, I'd say probably best to just max it out if you want to gain full benefit out of it. Unless if you just want to get a chance to debuff the enemies from time to time, then maybe a couple of points is enough, really. Yeah, not the best skill out there, but pretty okay. Okay, so those were the 4 fight masteries, and now I'll move on to the magic and support masteries. So I'll start with Earth. So Earth had 2 entirely new skills, so they're not linked to any of the previous skills. So the first one is the Meteor Rain, and on paper it actually sounds amazing. I mean, if you look at it, it's like, look at that colossal amount of damage, and it's like meteors raining from the sky, you know? But actually in practice, I actually didn't like it that much. I actually thought I think it's actually one of the worst newly added skills, and I'll give you my reason why. The reason for that is because those meteors, they spawn in really random places, and a lot of the time they actually miss your intended targets. So you can never really rely on it to hit the enemies that you wanted to hit. It will pretty much just randomly hit the enemies around you, and you don't know whom it will hit. It's not like that Blood of Ares artifact, which just has rain of blood, you know. It's actually just a few blocks of stone just spawning in the air and just collapsing down. So you can't really guarantee who it's gonna hit. You can't guarantee it's gonna hit the kind of the enemies that you wanted to hit. So in that sense, I actually didn't like this skill at all. I actually found it to be borderline useless. And to be honest, it's 12 points as well. You have to spend on it. So I don't think I would go for it personally. Now the other skill in the Earth mastery, this one I actually really liked. So this one's called Fire Nova, and what this does is that it spreads like a huge wave of fire over a really large area. Actually, if you know, it's 20 meters radius. It's quite a massive area. So with this one, you're actually guaranteed to hit every single enemy within seeing distance of you, within any enemy that can actually see you. So this is really great. It might be weaker than the Meteor Rain, but it's a hell of a lot more reliable. And if you notice, I mean, there's quite a good amount of burn damage and also fire damage. And if you remember, if you have Earth Enchantment, Earth Enchantment at maximum level actually adds plus 100% damage to fire and plus 100% damage to burn. So you're actually, you can pretty much double the damage on the skill if you got fully maxed out Earth Enchantment. So it actually will be dealing quite about 500 points of burn damage every second to every single enemy around you, and also another 240 fire damage as well on top of that. And it's got also a chance to impair aim, so that's really great. I mean, if you think about it, if you've got loads of enemies surrounding you, like about 1 in every 4 of them is going to be impaired. The aim is going to be impaired, so it's good when you've got loads of enemies surrounding you which firing projectiles in your direction. And also, if you compare to the Meteor Rain, it's got only half the energy cost. So Meteor Rain had 400 energy cost, like just over 400 energy cost. This one only has 270, so it's almost half. And it's also got a much smaller recharge time. So the Meteor Rain had 45 seconds recharge. This one only has 15, so you can use it 3 times as often. So you can get so much more benefit, and you only need to spend 8 points of skill points on this. So if you're going for Earth, Fire Nova is where it's at. This is what you want to get. This is a really amazing skill. You want to actually, it might be even better than the Eruption and the Volcanic Orb. So, yeah, if you're going for Earth, definitely recommend the Fire Nova. Okay, and while we are on the topic of very useful newly added area skills, I want to go to Nature now, because Nature also added a skill like that. It's called Earthbind. So this one also affects a very large area. If it's 22 meters radius, even slightly more than Fire Nova, even at maximum level. It's got a slightly longer recharge, though, so 20 seconds, and also requires more points, so 12 points. But it's got slightly more bonuses actually, if you notice. So it deals poison damage. It reduces the enemy defensive ability to every single enemy caught in between. It also does 5 seconds of immobilization. And it slows down the movement as well for 5-6 seconds is not bad at all. Of course, it's not going to be quite as easy to boost your poison damage compared to the Fire Nova's fire and burn damage. So, but it's still pretty great. I mean, if you these are really great debuffs on the enemies. So I'd say Earthbind is an incredibly useful skill to go for as a nature character. Especially if you've got anything that also deals poison damage. If you're a rogue and nature character, you're going to be going to town with that poison damage, you know. So yeah, very good skill. And its energy cost is not that high. I mean, compared to Fire Nova, it's only like 1/3 of its energy cost. So yeah, I would also recommend this skill for anyone who is a caster or an archer, because of its ability to slow and immobilize enemies. This will actually give you a nice way to actually create some distance between you and the enemies. So I would go for any kind of ranged character, will make good use of this, and poison damage character especially. But really, any nature character could make this skill very useful. So I'd go for Earthbind no matter which nature character you are. And the other newly added nature skill is pretty much the same thing, except it's something that the nymph uses, and it's not an area. So if you notice, it's actually it actually does the same thing. It's quite very much the same bonuses. So immobilizing enemies, reducing defensive ability, slowing their movement. But it's just a skill that only the nymph will use. So, and it's not an area. It's actually only just targets one enemy at a time. So I don't know how to feel about this one. I mean, if you're going for a nymph and you want to make her as powerful as possible, then yeah, go for this by all means. But otherwise, I mean, if you're not going for nymph, or if you're hesitating, then probably you can skip this one quite safely. I mean, you've got Earthbind already to cast yourself, so you might not really need this one. But yeah, if you are concentrating on the pants and if you want your nymph to be as powerful as possible, then yeah, this will be quite helpful. Alright, so let's cover Storm next. So the first skill that they added in Storm is called Arc Discharge, and that's a synergy to the Wisp. So this one, all it does really is just makes Wisp's Thunderclap ability stronger. But remember, the Wisp can only start using that Thunderclap ability once it has 5 or more points. So you can only get any benefit from this if you got at least 5 points in the Wisp, the base Wisp skill. And if you are going for a Wisp, if you want to concentrate on the Wisp, then yeah, I don't see a reason why you won't get this, because it makes the Wisp stronger. So yeah, I mean, there's not much to say about this skill. It's just like an extra buff to your Wisp, really. So yeah, good for Pet Monster builds, but probably not much for anyone else, really. And the other skill they added in Storm, it's a bit of a strange one. It's called Lightning Dash, and it's actually a left mouse button skill. And what it does is that it makes your character whiz really fast to the intended target, and it can make them whiz really fast between the targets as well. So if you notice, it's got a massive increase to the movement speed. So you're not moving whilst if you're standing and you're attacking the enemy, then you're not really utilizing the movement speed, but you can whiz between the enemies really fast. It's got a very nice percentage chance to dodge attacks and avoid projectiles at the maximum level, and you only need 6 skill points to this. So it's quite decent in that regard. But if you take into account that Storm is mainly a magic mastery, so most Storm characters will actually be mages, and this skill doesn't actually work with staffs. So if you're hoping it would work with staffs, it's not going to be any use. I haven't tested it with bows or throwing weapons, but I suspect it's going to be the same story as with staffs. So really the only characters that can actually gain any kind of benefit from this would be the hybrids. So if you got like Storm with Warfare, for example, or Storm with Defense, so they're actually going to gain benefit from this because they will be mainly attacking in the melee. So only melee weapons really will be gaining any benefit from this. So in that sense, yeah, if you're more of a mage Storm character, you're probably going to find that Wisp synergy more useful. And if you're a hybrid, you're going to find this more useful, which is, I guess it's alright, because hybrids are kind of underpowered in regard. So it's good that you have some skill that can make hybrids much more powerful. So yeah, there's nothing much to say about this skill. You have to keep in mind though, it's got 5 energy cost per use. So it could drain your energy pretty fast if your energy reserve isn't very high. So do keep an eye on that as well. Okay, so the next mastery I'll talk about is a Spirit Mastery. So from the 2 newly added skills, so the first one, so that's the synergy to the Life Drain. So this one's called Soul Drain. So if you remember, the life drain skill in the spirit was actually a little bit underpowered, so it was pretty good like in the first couple of acts of normal, and after that it used to get really weak. So in that sense, it's nice that they actually added a skill that can make synergy that can make that skill more useful. And Soul Drain is actually not bad at all. With only 6 points, you're getting a nice area effect from using the life drain. So it's actually will hit every enemy in a small area, and it does some pretty decent effect. So it's got quite a big reduction to enemies' health. It does vitality damage, so it drains some energy, and it actually can put them to sleep as well. And it's got an extra bonus damage to the ghost characters. So 200% damage to ghosts. Well, I wouldn't say it's among the best skills in the Spirit Mastery, but it certainly makes Life Drain worth having, especially at the later stages when Life Drain becomes useless. So I'd say as a mage character using Spirit, you can find some use out of this. Especially if you're concentrating on the vitality damage, and if you're gaining your energy mainly by draining from enemies, then this would be another extra way to drain some energy from the enemies. So I'd say it's a decent skill, not superb, but decent, pretty decent. Now another newly added skill in the Spirit Master is called Soul Vortex. So this one I think is even better. So what this one does is that it will drain health and energy from every enemy around you, like in a small kind of area. And it's actually really amazing. Okay, it's got 70-second recharge, so it's not the best kind of recharge, so like only once a minute you can use it. And it's got some energy costs, 165 energy costs, so it's pretty big, but if you think about it, if you're actually using it around enemies, you'll actually drain more energy from the enemies to actually make up for this energy cost. It lasts 4 seconds, so it's not overly long, but within these 4 seconds you can drain quite a substantial amount of health from the enemies, because it's a 5-meter radius, if you notice. So if you actually see, it's about 144 life leech per second, right? So imagine if you've got at least, well, say you've got 4 enemies surrounding you. Most times you'll have much more enemies surrounding you, but let's say if you have 4 enemies surrounding you, that'll be about 500, 600 damage, health restored per second. And within 4 seconds, you'll be looking at about 2000 health restored per second. So that's a really amazing way. I mean, if you look at the health bar as I'm using it, you can actually see how it pretty much restores your entire health within like fractions of a second. So it's a really amazing skill. It can actually save you on some potions, let's say. So if you have a Spirit Mastery, no matter what build you are, this would be a really great skill to get. So it's 10 points, so it's got quite a fair amount of points, and it could take a while for you to reach this, but yeah, that's a really great skill. Yeah, don't mind that it actually says next level 11, because I had +1 to skills and Spirit Mastery, that's why, but it's actually 10 points. So yeah, I'm actually really impressed by this skill. So I think it's one of the best skills newly added skills. So this is quite incredible. If you think it's actually how powerful this is, so actually that kind of once in a minute use is actually quite reasonable, let's say, because if you could use this any time, you'd be like unstoppable. Okay, so let's move on to the next mastery. Okay, so the Dream Mastery. So the first of the newly added Dream skills is called Dream Image. Now this is another one of those skills that actually sounds really great on paper, but it's actually pretty trashy in reality. So this is another one of the weakest skills I think added, along with the Meteor Rain. So Dream Image is basically draws forth an image of yourself to fight briefly by your side, and sounds like, wow, amazing, you get like a clone of yourself fighting by your side. Okay, so hold up a second, so just a few drawbacks. First of all, it only lasts 20 seconds. So this is actually like, you're not gonna make much use out of it, it's only 20 seconds. And then second of all, it's not exactly you really, it's just a temporary pet that looks like you. So just a temporary pet that looks like you and only lasts 20 seconds. It's got quite a fair amount of energy cost, and it's very long recharge time, so 140 seconds. So it's like, 2.5 minutes pretty much you gotta be waiting before you can use it again. I didn't find this, this skill to be any useful in terms of damage, or even drawing aggro. I mean, it could draw a little bit of aggro, like from a couple of enemies, but honestly, I'll personally skip this skill because I didn't find it to be useful at all. Alright, so the second skill in the Dream Mastery is a synergy to the Psionic Touch and Psionic Burn. So this one is Psionic Beam. But the flip side is that it's only useful with staffs. So you're not gonna be finding much use of it if you're a melee character. So only with staffs. And it's only 6 points, but it's actually pretty good. I actually think it's a good skill because if you notice, actually, it increases the projectile speed and increases chance to pass through enemies. And it actually, not from the first point, but I think once you get like about half of the points, it actually reduces the charge level. So if you remember the Psionic Touch, it actually has its effect on every 4th hit. So this actually makes it every 3rd hit now. So it's actually 1 less charge level. So it's actually more frequently that you're using a more powerful attack. And from what I experienced, it actually makes the staff attack quite significantly more powerful. I mean, I personally think it's on par with turn 9 attack, or probably even better. So if I had to pick between this and turn 9 attack, I'd probably pick this, because at least this actually, it hits on target, you know. So turn 9 attack kind of spreads its damage, whilst this is actually just, everything is going to be hitting every enemy, you know, that you're aiming at. And if you notice, actually, it adds all the effects from Psionic Touch and Psionic Burn to it as well. So now it can pass through enemies, and it can actually spread that effect onto every enemy that it passes through. So yeah, I'd say if you're a staff character, you should get this skill definitely. Alright, and last but not least, the Runes Mastery. So I left Runes till the end because that was the most recently added in the Ragnarok expansion. So the first skill in the Rune Mastery is called Rune Storm. So that's a completely new skill, and it's only 6 points, but it's pretty powerful skill, I'd say. It's not one of those quite impressive area skills, but it's not just a damage spreading over an area. It's actually like a area that follows you. So it lasts for 10 seconds, and any enemy caught in that area is actually going to be affected by it every second. So that damage and all those effects that it deals is actually going to be happening every single second. So it's actually really powerful skill if you think about it. And the area follows you. It's not just on the same spot. It actually follows you, so you can actually walk into as many enemies as you want to make sure all of them get affected by this. It's got a fairly long recharge time, so about 120 seconds, so you can only use it after every 2 minutes, and it's got incredible energy cost. So if you're going to be using this, you should, you know, get all those attribute points into energy, you know, so you don't leave yourself dry. But yeah, I mean, if you look, it's actually a really nice debuff, so it can have a chance of like skill disruption, stun, fear, confusion. It's got like some elemental retaliation. I'd say most rune characters should find this quite useful. Probably more for the ones which are actually melee, because melee ones are actually getting close to the enemy, you know. If you're a mage or an archer, you actually want to be staying away from the enemy, so maybe you won't find this too useful as ranged characters. But the problem with the melee characters is that melee characters don't invest quite as many points into the energy, so you would actually have to put quite a few energy points into your energy pool. And the other newly added rune skill is Rune Field, which is a synergy to the Runic Mines. Okay, it's got 15 points, skill points that you have to add. So that's like the most skill point hungry skill from the newly added ones. It's also got a colossal energy cost, if you know, so 375 energy at the maximum level. So if you're going to be going for this, you should be committing to this completely. It's a bit of an insane skill, really. I mean, you remember the Runic Mines, it only create like 5 or 6 mines around you, right? This one, like with every single point, it adds like an extra 2 or so. So by 15 points, you're actually getting 28 extra mines being spawned around you in a large area. You know, it's quite insane. So it's like if you got a lot of enemies surrounding you, this would be quite nice, because this would hit quite a lot of them. Although if you notice, these mines, they only have a 7.5 second duration, so they actually, if the enemy hasn't walked into them after 7.5 seconds, then they're gonna disappear. And most of the ones you're gonna spawn, enemies are not gonna touch them, you know. And runic mines, they were not particularly strong or anything. So, to say, is this worth investing? Probably a lot of the time not. For some builds, if you're going completely with the mines, probably more for mages, I'd say, because mages will be able to, with the intelligence stat, is going to be able to boost the damage from the mines. Yeah, probably not so much for the melee characters. So if you're going to go for this, you should max out the entire Runic Mines skill tree. And if you know it's a very skill point hungry tree now, because you had 10 points in the original skill, another 8 points in its first synergy, which that's the freezing mines, so that's actually pretty good to get as well if you're going for mines. And then so that's 18, another 15, so that's 33 skill points you're going to be spending just on the runic mines. So if you're going for this, you should go for the whole thing really, and be prepared to have to spend a lot of energy on this as well. So yeah, probably most rune builds I wouldn't really recommend this one, but for some of them can actually find this pretty useful. And lastly, to conclude, as you saw, there's been quite a whole array of new added skills, so some of them have been incredibly useful, some of them have been kind of okayish, and there have been like a couple or so not very good ones at all. So whether you agree or disagree, feel free to say in the comments, or if you find any specific use for any of the skills that I haven't mentioned, yeah, feel free to mention in the comments as well. But yeah, I hope that was useful actually. So certainly these skills have added some new twists to existing classes, and I actually like that they decided to add synergies to some of the weaker skills from before, like the Ancestral Warriors, for example, or the Life Drain, because some of those skills were quite underpowered previously, but now having some synergies to them actually makes them more useful. So in that sense, it's actually good that the devs have done this. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope you guys found this useful. Bye bye.